Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be talking about cocaine and its effects on the brain. Cocaine is a stimulant that is inhaled or snorted through the nose, smoked or injected directly into the bloodstream. Crack is a derivative that is normally smoked. On your left-hand side, you can see here, we have the powdered substance known as cocaine, and on your right-hand side, we have the crack rocks or crack and the associated crack pipe with it. This is a picture of the neuron. Out here are called the dendrites, which receive information to the neuron, and it goes into the body, which is called the soma. The soma then decides to send an electron to the, through the axon and to the terminal buttons. The myelin sheath protects the axon. If you think about it, it's like a cord that protects the wire, essentially, where the electricity runs through. And it goes to the terminal buttons and then onto the synapse. The electron then pops the vesicles, which are right here. They come down here and pop. The vesicle releases the dopamine, which you can see the dopamine is released. Dopamine travels through the synapse to the postsynaptic membrane. Travels in here and seats itself, as you can see. The synapse is the area between two neurons. When cocaine enters the equation, it stops the reabsorption of dopamine. Dopamine then is able to flood the synapse and allows for the buildup for a euphoric high. So the electron comes down here, pops the vesicle. Vesicle then releases the dopamine, comes into here. But when cocaine is added, the cocaine comes in and it will start filling up the ability to reabsorb, so it stops the reabsorption process. So the entire area is then flooded.
With dopamine.
With dopamine. What neurotransmitters are affected by this drug? Dopamine is the primary neurotransmitter that cocaine affects. What is the function of dopamine? Dopamine, the neurotransmitter involved in movement control, attention, pleasure, and reward.
What part of the brain is most affected by cocaine? The limbic system, the part of the brain most affected by cocaine, contains the amygdala, which is in charge of fear and aggression, and the hippocampus, which is responsible for long-term memory and emotional responses. It is responsible for self-preservation, learning, memory, and the experience of pleasure. In the image to the left shows activity increase in the brain caused by cocaine, which speeds up the metabolism in the brain. This can lead to tissue damage. Cocaine also increases your heart rate and blood pressure, which can result in a stroke as shown to the right. Cocaine use side effects. Some short-term side effects is happiness and energy, mental alertness, hypersensitivity to sight, sound, and touch, irritability, and paranoia, which can be extreme and unreasonable distress. Some long-term side effects from snorting can be nosebleeds, loss of smell, problems swallowing, frequent runny nose. From smoking, cough, asthma, respiratory distress, and pneumonia. And from injection, skin and soft tissue infections, scarring, and vein collapse. Chronic use. Chronic use of cocaine forces the brain to rely on the drug use to maintain the high or degree of pleasure achieved. Continuous use can also cause neurons and other brain structures to change. For example, the number of postsynaptic receptor sites may increase, causing increased cravings. In turn, also causes increased depression on the flip side. This can be referred to as chasing the dragon. What is the overall result on behavior on the parts of the brain identified above, and how does it lead to addiction? One of the things that cocaine does is flood the brain with dopamine and not allow the reabsorption of leftover dopamine. though it produces pleasurable sensations. The pleasurable effects come with a cost. The risk of the brain being permanently rewired, likely resulting in the physical and psychological addiction. This drug can result in hallucinations, and in the event of an overdose, could result in death.
Okay, now here's a short video to sum up the information we have provided.
Of music legend Whitney Houston,
Crack is whack.
but with all the extra attention lately thanks to Toronto Mayor Rob Ford, what exactly is crack cocaine? Is it really as whack as it's portrayed to be? Crack is simply another form of cocaine which comes from the leaves of a coca plant. After mixing powdered cocaine with a weak base such as baking soda, it changes composition and a solid is produced, often referred to as rocks. This solid has a much lower melting point than cocaine, allowing it to be smoked as opposed to snorted. In fact, it's called crack because of the sound it makes when heated. But why smoke it? Well, the lungs are an extremely quick and effective way of getting something into the bloodstream. Those with asthma, for example, use inhalers to quickly put a drug directly into their system. When smoke meets the large surface area in your lungs, it too slips right through the membrane and heads straight to your brain in as little as 8 seconds. This is much faster and more intense than the effects of snorted cocaine, which generally takes around 10 minutes to reach the brain. However, once in the brain, crack and cocaine are effectively identical. Initially, users feel energized, alert, and much more aware of their senses. In the brain, crack acts on the ventral tegmental area, releasing large amounts of dopamine, the chemical often associated with feelings of pleasure and euphoria. This dopamine travels between brain cells, called neurons, and binds to receptors that trigger the good feelings. Now, normally, this dopamine would be reabsorbed back into the neuron by a dopamine transporter. However, crack alters this process. It attaches to the transporter and blocks the reabsorption, allowing dopamine to build up and continually stimulate the receptors. As a result, you feel, well, really good for about 10 minutes. But soon after, the dopamine levels in the brain plummet, causing an extreme low and often feelings of depression, which is why many users typically smoke more, hoping to reach that high again. Unfortunately, these dopamine levels can take a long time to naturally replenish, contributing to physical and psychological dependence or addiction, as well as increased irritability, restlessness, and paranoia. In some cases, crack or cocaine abuse can lead to something called delusional parasitosis, the feeling that bugs or insects are crawling under the skin. This often leads to self-destructive behavior like scratching or biting in an effort to get rid of the imagined bugs. In the most serious cases, crack's impact on the heart can cause heart attacks, strokes, or even stop the heart altogether, leading to death. Simply put, on the extreme end of things, crack can get pretty whack. Thanks to Audible.com for giving you a free audiobook of your choice at audible.com/ASAP.
Our citations would be Feldman 2017, utilizing the Khan Academy, and the rest are images. 2 other sites are for images, and the YouTube video is cited down here at this address. My name is Eric Curtin.
I'm Jillian Rossiter.
And I'm Rebecca Perini.
This has been our video on cocaine and its effects on the brain.